Now we come to the next sutta, 9.2.14. Now the Venerable Samidi visited the Venerable Sariputta, saluted him and sat down at one side. And the Venerable Sariputta spoke to him so seated. What Samidi is the basis of purposive thoughts? Sankappa vitaka, or sometimes translated as intentional thoughts. And he answered, mentality, materiality, sir. Namarupa. What gives them their variety, the elements, dhatu? What gives rise to them, contact? Wherein have they common ground, in feeling? When are they at their best, in a state of concentration? What is their master state, mindfulness? What is their still higher state, wisdom? What is their very essence, the giving of liberation? Wherein are they finally merged, in the deathless? Such Samidi are the questions, and such are your answers. Well done, Samidi. Well have you answered the questions put to you, but be not vain on that account. That's the end of the sutta. This is one of the suttas which is quite deep, and we have to think about it. So, I'll just comment that the basis of purposive thoughts or intentional thoughts here is said to be Namarupa. And Namarupa is mentality, materiality, that means phenomena. Phenomena that consciousness is conscious of. Usually, quite often, Namarupa is wrongly translated as mind and matter. But if Nama is mind, then the basis of purposive thoughts should be mind, should be Nama. But here it is not Nama. The basis of purposive thoughts is Namarupa. So Namarupa is phenomena, mentality, materiality. Nama does not incorporate consciousness. Now, dhatu, there are several types of dhatu, the four great elements, earth, water, fire, wind, but they are not actually earth, water, fire, wind. They are the characteristics of earth represents hardness, water represents cohesion, fire represents heat, wind represents motion. Dhatu could also refer to the 18 elements, the 6 sense organs, the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. And the 6 sense organs, the 6 sense objects of form, sound, smell, taste, touch and thoughts. And the 6 consciousness. These are the 18 elements. Or it could also Dhatu could also refer to the 6 elements, the 4 great elements, earth, water, fire, wind, plus space, plus consciousness. The next sutta is 9.2.15. The Buddha said, imagine, monks, a boil which has been gathering for many years. It might have 9 gaping wounds, 9 natural openings. Thence whatever might ooze out, foulness would certainly ooze out, stench would certainly ooze out, loathsomeness would certainly ooze out. Whatever might be discharged, foulness would certainly be discharged, stench would certainly be discharged, loathsomeness would certainly be discharged. A boil, that is the name for the body, monks, made up as it is of the 4 great elements, procreated by mother and father, built up of gruel and sour milk, impermanent, subject to erosion, abrasion, dissolution and disintegration, with 9 gaping wounds, 9 natural openings, and from it whatever oozes out, foulness certainly oozes out, stench certainly oozes out, loathsomeness certainly oozes out. Whatever be discharged, foulness is certainly discharged, stench is certainly discharged, loathsomeness is certainly discharged. Wherefore, monks, be you disgusted with this body. That's the end of the sutta. You see here that the Buddha's teaching is to be disgusted with the human body, that the body is a loathsome thing with 9 openings on which discharges dirty things, foul things. But the worldly way is to see the body as something attractive, as something exciting. And here the Buddha is certainly trying to tell us the opposite, so that we can be free of suffering. The next sutta is 9.2.19. It's quite an important sutta. This night, monks, when night was nearly spent, there visited me a host of devas of surpassing beauty, shedding their rays over almost the whole of Jeta Grove, and they saluted me and stood at one side. So standing they spoke thus to me: Lord, when we dwelt among men in times gone by, homeless wanderers visited us, and though we arose out of respect, we did not salute them with raised hands. Lord, by not fulfilling this duty, we have suffered remorse and have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. Monks, then another host of devas approached me and said, Lord, when we dwelt among men in times gone by, homeless wanderers visited us, and though we arose and saluted them, we did not offer them seats. Lord, by not fulfilling this duty, we have suffered remorse and have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came and said, though we arose and saluted them and offered them seats, we did not share our food in accordance with our ability and power, and we have been sorry since, wherefore we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came and said, though we shared though we did all the former things, plus sharing our food, we did not sit around to hear Dhamma. And so we have also been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came and visited the Buddha and said, though we did all these former things and we sat around to hear Dhamma, we did not lend an ear and hearken to Dhamma. And we have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came and said that though they did all these things, the former things, though we lent an ear and hearkened to Dhamma, we did not bear in mind what we had heard. And we have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came to the Buddha and said, though we did all the former things, and we bore in mind what we heard, but we did not investigate the meaning of what we had learned, and we have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. And another group came and said that though we did all these former things, and we investigated the meaning of Dhamma we had learned, knowing both the spirit and the letter, we did not walk in conformity with Dhamma. Lord, by not fulfilling this duty, we have suffered remorse and have been sorry since, for we have been reborn in a mean body. Monks, yet another host of devas approached me and said, when we dwelt among men in times gone by, homeless wanderers visited us. Lord, we arose and saluted them, offered them seats, shared our food in accordance with our ability and power, sat around to hear Dhamma, lent an ear and hearkened to Dhamma, bore in mind Dhamma we had heard, investigated the meaning of Dhamma we had learned, and knowing both the spirit and the letter of Dhamma, we walked in conformity therewith. Lord, by fulfilling these duties, we have suffered no remorse, nor have we been sorry since, for we have been born in an excellent body. And the Buddha continued, monks, behold these 3 roots, these empty places. Cultivate jhana, monks, be not idle, suffer not remorse afterwards, as did those first 8 hosts of devas. That's the end of the sutta. It's quite an interesting sutta, because you can see from here that these devas, when they were human beings before, like us now, they did not pay sufficient respect to the homeless renunciants, or did not pay enough respect to the Dhamma by listening to the Dhamma, bearing in mind what they had heard, etc. And as a result of these, when they were reborn in heaven, they had a mean body, meaning that their body was not as beautiful or as bright as other heavenly beings. Compared to other heavenly beings, they were born with a mean body compared to the others, and because they were deficient in certain of their duties, so they have been sorry since. But then the last group of devas, they did all the things that were good, and so they were born in an excellent body, and they had no regrets. And so we should take note of this, that there are certain things that we should do, and certain things that we should not do. And if we carry out all the things that we should do, and avoid all the things that we should not do, then we would have no regret. But if we do certain things that we should not do, for example, criticize other people or criticize monks, then in the end we will be sorry, because finally when we are about to pass away, other people's faults does not matter at all. It is our own faults that matter. It is our own faults that will weigh us down and pull us down, whereas others' faults, other people have to bear them. So we should not be concerned with other people's faults, but we should be concerned only with our faults. Look within, because we are not responsible for other people, but we are responsible for ourselves. And finally, the Buddha said in the last part, he told his monks to cultivate jhana, jayata. The Pali word is jayata, and it means cultivate jhana. Sometimes some books translate it as practice meditation or meditate, but the actual meaning is to cultivate jhana. So the Buddha, in effect, is telling his disciples that if they cultivate jhana, then they would not suffer remorse afterwards, because jhana is the last factor of the Aryan Eightfold Path. And if a person carries out all the factors, practices all the factors of the Aryan Eightfold Path, which culminates in jhana, then that person would have no regret later. But if we practice the Aryan Eightfold Path insufficiently, without cultivating jhana, if we miss out on any of the 8 factors of the Aryan Eightfold Path, then we would have remorse and we would suffer later, like the devas. Even though they were born in heaven, yet they had some regrets for some of the things that they had not done. So in the same way, if we carry out the instructions of the Buddha's teachings fully, then we would carry out all the 8 factors of the Aryan Eightfold Path. Sutta 9.2.20 is quite an important sutta. Once when the Exalted One was dwelling near Savatthi at Jeta Grove in Anathapindika's park, the householder Anathapindika visited him, and after saluting sat down at one side. And the Exalted One addressed Anathapindika thus: "Is alms given in your family, householder?" And he said, "Yes, Lord, but it consists of a coarse mess of broken rice grains together with sour gruel." I stop here for a moment. According to the commentary, the Buddha was asking Anathapindika, the biggest supporter of the Buddha, about whether he gives alms to, not to monks, but to the world at large, whether to beggars or whatever. And the Buddha continued, householder, whether one gives coarse alms or choice alms, if one gives unattentively, without respect, not with one's own hand, give what is to be thrown away, and with a view or expectation in the future, then wheresoever that alms-giving bear fruit, his mind will not turn to the enjoyment of excellent food, of fine clothing, of rich carriages, to the enjoyment of the excellencies of the five senses, and one's sons and one's daughters, one's slaves, messengers, and workfolk will have no desire to listen to one, nor lend an ear, nor bring understanding to bear on what one says, and why. Such is the result, householder, of deeds done casually. But whether one give coarse alms or choice alms, householder, if one give attentively, sakachang, respectfully, chitikatava, with one's own hand, give other than what is to be thrown away, and without a view or expectation in the future, then wheresoever that alms-giving bear fruit, his mind will turn to the enjoyment of good food, of fine clothing, of rich carriages, of the excellences of the five senses, and one's sons and one's daughters, one's slaves, messengers, and workfolk will desire to listen to one, will lend an ear, and bring understanding to bear on what one says, and why. Such is the result, householder, of deeds done considerately. I just stop here to comment. Here the Buddha is saying that if one gives, one should give attentively and respectfully, not like some people, if they give something to a beggar, they throw it without respect. That's not good. With one's own hand, if one is able to, it is best that one does the giving oneself and give other than what is to be thrown away. That means give not something that is too old or something that you don't value at all. And you should also give without an expectation in the future, without thinking of the reward. Then if with that kind of giving, then the blessings will be much more. And the Buddha continued, long ago, householder, there lived a Brahmin called Velama. He gave very rich gifts such as these. He gave 84,000 golden bowls filled with silver. He gave 84,000 silver bowls filled with gold. He gave 84,000 copper bowls filled with treasure. He gave 84,000 steeds with trappings of gold, with banners of gold, covered with nets of gold thread. He gave 84,000 chariots, spread with lion skins, tiger skins, leopard skins, saffron-colored blankets, with golden trappings, golden banners, covered with nets of gold thread. He gave 84,000 milk cattle, with tethers of fine jute, with milk pails of silver. He gave 84,000 maidens adorned with jeweled earrings. He gave 84,000 couches spread with fleecy covers, white blankets and woolen flower embroidered coverlets, covered with rugs of antelope skins, with awnings above and crimson cushions at each end. He gave 84,000 lengths of cloth, of finest flax, of finest silk, of finest wool, of finest cotton. And who shall tell of the food and the drink that he gave? Food both hard and soft, sweet meats and syrups. They flowed, it seems, like rivers. Perhaps, householder, you may think thus, maybe Velama, the Brahmin who made that very rich gift, was someone else. But think not so, for it was I who at that time was Velama, the Brahmin. It was I who made that very rich gift. But when that alms was given, householder, there was no one worthy to receive the gift. There was none to sanctify that gift. For though Brahmin Velama gave that very rich gift, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he fed one person of right view. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that long ago he was a Brahmin by the name of Velama, and he gave a lot of things away. 84,000 golden bowls filled with silver, 84,000 silver bowls filled with gold, 84,000 copper bowls filled with treasure, etc., etc., horses and chariots and clothings and slaves and cattle, etc. This figure 84,000 does not exactly mean 84,000, but it signifies a very great number in that range of 84,000. So the Buddha is saying, although he gave so much away, yet there was no one worthy to receive the gift. All the people at that time were putujanas, ordinary people, because there was no Dhamma in the world. There being no Dhamma in the world, the people were ordinary people. So the Buddha said, in spite of all that gifts that he gave, so much, greater would have been the merit or the blessings had he fed one person with right view. A person with right view is an Arya. That means here, it means a Sotapanna. Sotapanna, one with either who has attained the first path or the first fruition. Why is it that he has given so much gifts, so much charity, yet he says there was it doesn't measure to one giving one person of right view, and in effect, this means that the blessings from all those gifts was not very, very much. And that is because ordinary people, putujanas, they create more evil karma than good. That is why the Buddha said most people are reborn in the woeful plains. Few come back to the human world or are reborn in the Deva realm. But if one can give to an Arya, then the fruit would be very, very much. Then the Buddha continued, though he gave that very rich gift, although he fed 100 persons of right view, that means Sotapanna, greater would have been the fruit at once returner Sakadagamin, a second fruition person. Though he gave that very rich gift, although he fed 100 once returners, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he fed one non-returner Anagamin, third fruition person. Though he fed 100 non-returners Anagamins, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he fed one Arahant, fourth fruition Arya. Though he fed 100 Arahants, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he fed one Pacheka Buddha. Though he fed 100 Pacheka Buddhas, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he fed one Tathagata Arahant Sama Sambuddha. Though he fed the Sangha of monks with the Buddha at the head, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he built a monastery for the use of the monks of the Sangha of the surrounding country. Though he built a monastery Greater would have been the fruit if he took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Though with pious heart he took refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he with pious heart undertaken to keep the precepts, abstention from taking life, from taking what is not given, from adultery, from lying, from intoxicating liquor, the cause of sloth. Though with pious heart he undertook to keep these precepts, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he made become a mere passing fragrance of metta, that is goodwill or loving kindness. Though he made become just the fragrance of metta, greater would have been the fruit thereof had he made become just for a finger snap the thought of impermanence. And that's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha continued that even if he had fed 100 Sotapanna, first fruition person, the merit would have been greater if he had fed once returner Sakadagamin, and after that even feeding 100 Sakadagamins is less than the blessings of feeding one non-returner Anagamin, and feeding 100 non-returners is less than the merit of feeding one Arahant. And the blessings of feeding one Arahant is less than the blessings of feeding one Pacceka Buddha. A Pacceka Buddha is a Buddha who does not spread the Dhamma, the teachings. He practices himself and stays by himself, but he shows a good example to the world, but he does not spread, teach the Dhamma. And feeding 100 Pacceka Buddhas is not equivalent to feeding one Samma Sambuddha. What is the difference between an Arahant and a Buddha? An Arahant is one. Actually, Arahant is also used for a Buddha, but all Buddhas are Arahants, but all Arahants are not Buddhas, in the sense like all doctors are human beings, but not all human beings are doctors. So, out of all the Arahants, some are Buddhas, and they are Buddhas because they are self-enlightened. A Buddha has no teacher in his last life. He struggles by himself and attains enlightenment, whereas Arahant is normally used for a disciple of a Buddha. Having learned the Dhamma from the Buddha, it is easier for him to become enlightened because he has the guidance given by the Buddha. And even feeding the Sangha of monks with the Buddha at the head, greater would be the merit of building a monastery. Why? The greatest gift that a person can give is the giving of Dhamma. And when we build a monastery, it helps to perpetuate the Sangha of monks. And when the Sangha of monks is continued, then the Dhamma will last in the world. If the Sangha of monks is broken, the lineage of the Sangha is broken, then the sasana, the religion, will slowly die, because the Dhamma would not be spread or carried on by monks. So it is very important to support monks, and especially build monasteries for monks to live, and to ordain others so that the lineage of the Sangha can continue, so that the Dhamma will not die out. And building a monastery is not equivalent to taking refuge. You see, up to this point, building of the monastery is like the greatest material giving that you can give. The charity, the highest is building a monastery. After this point, it is self-cultivation. Self-cultivation, because cultivating oneself is different from giving. In giving, in making offerings, we are getting worldly merit, which brings us to a good rebirth, perhaps rebirth as a deva, heavenly being, or a human. But it does not get us out of the round of rebirths. To get us out of the round of rebirths, we have to cultivate ourselves. We have to practice the Aryan Eightfold Path. Namely, can also said to be three things: Sila, Samadhi, Panya, moral conduct, concentration, and wisdom. And this, in Chinese, if we cultivate ourselves, we get Gongte, spiritual merit. Whereas if we do charity, we do giving, that only gives us Futta. Futta is worldly blessings. Does not really take us out of samsara. So the first step in cultivating ourselves is to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Rely on the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. And greater than that is the merit of cultivating the precepts, keeping the precepts. Greater than that is the merit of practicing metta, loving kindness or goodwill. And greater than that is the thought of impermanence. Now this is all that is shown in this sutta. But there is another sutta in the Digha Nikaya, sutta number 5, called the Kutta Danta Sutta, where this list continues. Become the thought of impermanence means in that sutta, it means that one renounces, becomes a renunciant or a monk. And after that, greater than the merit of renouncing is attaining the jhanas, attaining the meditative absorptions, the concentrations, jhanas. And greater than that is attaining the various abhinya, higher knowledges, the supernormal powers, the psychic powers, up to arahanthood. The attainment of arahanthood is the greatest merit that one can attain. Now, a lot of people, if we don't understand a sutta like this, Dhamma like this, we think that it is very, very important to do charity only. Charity is important because it helps us to get a good rebirth instead of getting a rebirth in the woeful plains. But if we understand the Dhamma, then we should not stop there. We should cultivate ourselves.